Friends, this is a topic I know all too well from both the person looking for energy, actually begging for it, to the person who has found some answers. For years, when I was working on television, I'd find myself so tired in the middle of the day that I was desperate to try anything to help give me more energy. Think coffee, energy drinks, exercise. I just couldn't find energy. But I realized there was a reason behind that slump, and I needed to listen to my body. Do you relate? Well, this week I'm talking to my go-to health expert, Suzy Cohen. She's a longtime friend and a trained pharmacist, but she goes beyond drugs. In fact, she believes, like I do, in understanding why you feel the way you do, and to do that first before medication. Today, you're going to learn some tips and tricks to access more energy naturally without relying on pharmaceutical pills, energy drinks, and yes, that coffee. Suzy has been a licensed pharmacist for 30 years. She is a functional medicine practitioner. She devotes time to educating people about the benefits of natural vitamins, herbs, and minerals. And if you want more information on Suzy, check out the show notes for this episode, where you can access some of the natural remedies that I personally use for wellness, sleep, and energy. Let's get started. Suzy Cohen is joining me. I always love it when she comes on because I learn so much. She is a pharmacist, an author, and so much more. Suzy, good to see you today.
Thanks for having me again, Natalie. It's great to be with you.
So for many, many years as a morning show TV anchor, I lived on coffee, and I still like a couple of cups of coffee. I might even go for one in the afternoon, but I found that there were other things that were affecting my lack of energy. And I want to talk to you about that today. What are the main issues people have with that slump, sometimes in the morning, but often in the afternoon?
Yeah. Well, on our first show, we talked about insomnia. So that comes to mind first, because if you're not sleeping well, you're going to be tired during the day. And full disclosure,
You have coffee too, see?
yeah, and I have a backup just in case. No, I'm kidding. This is a prop. This is what people use to get energy. It's a quick fix. They'll take a bite of that, or they'll, have some caffeine, or whatever. Those drinks, the bull. What do they
The
call
Red
those?
Bull and energy
That one.
drinks. Those are so, and in some ways, I want to get into that
Yeah.
because they are so popular, yet in abundance, they're dangerous.
Yes, they can. They can impact that cardiovascular system. So it's definitely nothing to joke about. But aside from insomnia, if we put that one away, because that's the most obvious, I would say the next problem would be either suppressed cortisol, or maybe a lack of thyroid hormone, or anemia. There's so much more. I mean, it could even be related to probiotics, but we can get into this whenever you want.
Let's talk about natural forms of energy first. A little bit of coffee. You and I both do it. What is a normal amount? What's too much?
1 or 2 cups a day, I think, is fine for most people. A lot of people have a genetic SNP. I actually have it. It's a COMT SNP, and not to get too technical, but it makes the coffee I drink last a long time. So it's great for me. But in other people with this genetic SNP, it may make them jittery. It may make them intolerant to anything with caffeine and any stimulants. So, that could be one factor.
So aside from caffeine, what are some other ways we might find a little bit of an energy boost without
Okay.
continuing to drink coffee all day?
Yes. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is like a probiotic. Probiotics are great because they convert 25 to 30% of your thyroid hormone into a biologically active stimulating type of hormone. So I don't know if people are aware of this, but there's T4 thyroid hormone, thyroxine, and then there's T3, which is the biologically active form of thyroid hormone. It's triiodothyronine. So the the thyroid gland secretes T4, but then your cells have to convert it to T3, which is active. Armour thyroid is a drug that contains both of those. But in the body, endogenously speaking, the T3 conversion has to happen, or you don't feel good. You will be hypothyroid without enough T3. And probiotics will help make that conversion, again, 25 to 30%. Other nutrients that help with that conversion and wake you up and help you grow your hair and improve your thyroid function and keep you warm and happy and able to focus, all the things that go with thyroid include vitamin D and an adequate level of cortisol.
Okay, so those are so important. And here's what I've started to do. And I know you're a proponent of this. And I think a lot of people don't know that they can do this. And that is to find out where things stand in their own body, getting a blood panel. How do you suggest people go about that? Ironically speaking, I just had this done. I have my results, and I find it so interesting, and I geek out a little bit on it, but not everyone knows that they can do this. Do they just go to their doctor, which is what I've done, and said, can you please do a blood panel? What would you call it? I just asked him to give me my general vitamin levels so I know like for instance, my vitamin D is low. Here I live in Colorado, it's sunny, yet I'm low on vitamin D. And you just mentioned how important that is.
Yeah, vitamin D helps to convert T4 to T3, and it also supports immunity. To your first question about how does one go about getting these labs and what are they? Yes, you can absolutely ask your doctor. Any caring doctor would be happy to order what's called a thyroid profile. I would look at that and a SMAC and a CBC. These are pretty generic, basic things. If you get to the point where you have to nag your physician for some reason, you can do all these lab tests autonomously. You can go to a local lab, I would call an advanced Quest, LabCorp, or sometimes the outpatient laboratories in hospitals see people every day for self-ordered tests. So that's a new thing that's
Great
changed.
idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can go online too, and you can book at places like anylabtestsnow.com. And there's I even sell a test at my website called Dutch because I'm recognized as a provider. And the Dutch test is a urine test which checks for comprehensive hormones like estrogen, progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, as well as it doesn't check for thyroid, but it checks for cortisol and cortisone and the metabolites. And so there's many ways to get lab tests. First, you could ask your doctor. Second, go online. Third, just self-order at a lab
I
locally.
think taking these things on yourself can be a little bit overwhelming. We might
Mhm.
not understand, like you are so proficient in this, and that's why I love talking to you. But it's a little bit overwhelming. You think, I just need to know what to buy. I just need to know what to do because it can be overwhelming. But the main vitamins that I'm hearing from you that we need to look at, you said vitamin D. What are some others that affect our energy?
Oh, so I have good ideas for energy producing things. So something as simple as spearmint, like whether
Okay.
it's spearmint tea or spearmint essential oil, that's kind of like a wake me up type of herb. And a lot of people put the essential oil on their temples when they have a migraine or headache coming on. So that could be just a quick pick me up, and you can turn it into a smoothie or a tea, an iced tea. Another herb is schizandra, which is known as an adrenal adaptogen. And these herbs aren't right for everyone, and people can research on their own and ask their own doctor. But schizandra is fabulous. Another one is eleuthero. That's a more of a like a nootropic. Lion's mane is another one. That's actually a medicinal mushroom. And
Are
then
these things that we would take in capsule form? We would drink in a tea, or does it matter?
yes to both. You can drink in a tea for a milder effect. I always love teas. I feel like, as a pharmacist, everything is so clinical and sterile, but there's this part of me that's the natural pharmacist. And I really love how people can bond with their medicine, and drinking tea, iced or hot, is such a wonderful way to do that. And of course, you get whole herb too when you're doing that. Like, as another example, licorice. Licorice is a great adrenal supplement because it helps to convert cortisol to cortisone, which is less active. And the key component in licorice is called glyceric acid. And then, well, I know we're getting a little sidetracked, but that cortisone and that cortisol is really important because doctors will measure that, and you'll get this blood level that says it's low or it's high or whatever, because cortisol is based on stress, right? So when you're super stressed, the cortisol goes up, 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 up. But
Mm,
then eventually it peters out, and then it's all gone. And then you're like flatlined
what
because,
happened?
oh,
Yeah.
wait, what happened? But those hormones get metabolized even further in the body by 5 alpha reductase, which is a very famous enzyme that men look at, especially when it relates to prostate, and women look at, especially as it relates to adult acne and oily skin and PCOS. But the reason I bring up the 5 alpha pathway is because I don't think that the free cortisol levels tell us very much, or the free cortisone, or metabolized cortisone for that matter. And the only test that can evaluate those downline metabolites, which are abbreviated THF and THE, is the Dutch test, which is an at-home urine test. So again, the more telling factor for someone's chronic fatigue would be THE and THF, and those stand for tetrahydrocortisol and tetrahydrocortisone. Don't worry about all that. If you take the Dutch test, you'll be able to see exactly what's causing that problem.
Okay, so I want to take that test. I have my blood panel in front of me right now, and you mentioned free cortisol, and mine is really low. What does that say about me?
Well, if you're just looking at a screenshot blood spot in time, like just, like a blood test, it doesn't say much. Because it changes every second. Maybe
I see.
you were sticking,
Okay.
it's not really showing you what's going on over the last few months. You really have to look at those metabolites, the THE and the THF, which are available again through, testing of the urine, because the urine sees a more backwards retrospective look.
So if I do that, I want to do this urine test that you're talking about. And what will I do if it's off? What kinds of vitamins will I take, or what will you suggest after doing that type of test?
Mm-hmm. So if it's high or low, that would be more telling. And so the treatment would hinge on that. And sometimes you can do it by diet, sometimes lifestyle factors and better sleep hygiene, and sometimes those adaptogenic herbs that I talked about. And some I haven't mentioned, even like rhodiola is another one. But one of the mainstays for producing energy, like for women, like moms who are tired, or moms and dads who are just burning the candle at 3 different ends, there is a way. There's a way to do that.
I think I did it at 4 ends for many years.
You take time. But you could do something like greens, or that was Yummy Greens, which is one of my formulas that cranks up energy, or green drink. These are available in different flavors at any grocery store. B vitamins are another important mainstay when it comes to helping people, because the B vitamins are just super adept at converting food into fuel and energy. And of course, there's always chocolate, and when it's laced with coffee,
is that okay? Is that an okay way to deal with the lack of energy?
Probably not. But I mean, don't eat the whole bar. I mean, like as an example, if I wanted a little boost of energy right before our interview, I might have had a bite or two. I'm not.
Doesn't mean you have to eat the whole thing, though. That's a great tip.
I'm not going to disclose that.
Well, I think that each of these things, and maybe the biggest lesson that we learn here in this podcast, is to understand what your body's going through, why you don't have energy, and then take it upon yourself to learn and do, to get the vitamins that you specifically need, because what your neighbor or your best friend needs might not be what you are lacking.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And sometimes the tests are difficult to interpret. As an example, you said earlier in the show, and it's so sweet and cool to see you like just telling your labs like that. Like, who does that? You're so real.
I'm an open book, Suzy.
You are. And, so many people will benefit from you being so gracious. And you mentioned that your vitamin D is low. And I know the blood test you're talking about. And I don't think people are aware that the blood test for vitamin D is just measuring an inactive form of vitamin D. It's measuring 25-hydroxy D. It's not measuring the biologically active form of D, which probably is suppressed as well, since, the inactive one has to be converted in the kidneys to the active form, which is 1,25-hydroxycholecalciferol. We abbreviate it to calcitriol. I guess what I'm saying is these blood tests for vitamin D aren't measuring the biologically active form of D, which might be okay, might not be. It's hard to say. But it's almost like the TSH test, which is a thyroid test. It measures a pituitary hormone called TSH. And to me, it's almost irrelevant unless it's done in context with a larger panel, because it's sort of like a shadow of thyroid. It's not really measuring thyroid. It's measuring the stimulating hormone, TSH, again, a pituitary hormone. So to me, the better test is the T3, T4, the free and total. And reverse T3. So what people should do, and the take home message is, if you're going to measure your vitamin D, have them measure both metabolites. If you're going to measure your thyroid and see how it's doing, the TSH will not do. You must ask for a thyroid profile. And again, you can self-order these tests.
That's important to know. I think
That
some,
is
but
huge.
I do think people they get very confused. I mean, this is normal everyday talk for you, and you're brilliant, so that helps too. But they do just get confused. And so they just grab vitamins. They might go to the grocery store and just grab. Is there harm in that, in just taking, well, I think I need to take vitamin D, and then just taking it, not knowing what your actual panel might be or what your needs are? Can we overdo certain, quote, popular vitamins?
Yeah, we can. If you take too much vitamin D and you have a parathyroid condition where your PTH is elevated and your calcium is elevated, then you're going to push yourself in a bad direction, because vitamin D helps calcium get
Hmm.
incorporated into the cells. So there are certain, contraindications is the best word I can think of. It's the pharmacist word. There are certain precautions that people should take. And so that's one of them. I always like to address nutrients from the dietary standpoint.
Mhm.
Even though I sell supplements, I know that sounds weird, and I'm a pharmacist and I'm not pushing drugs, but I'm all about food and teas and natural ways. And if you wanted to increase levels of energy, one of the simplest things you could do is increase foods that contain the amino acid tyrosine, because L-tyrosine is the amino acid that is used by your thyroid gland to make thyroid hormone. So
So
when you
what are
have
those foods?
yeah, so to make more thyroid hormone is like turning
Yeah.
on a fat burning switch and an energy switch. It just
Okay, I want that. Turn on that switch.
so it's easy. Tyrosine rich foods would include just meats, like think lean chicken and turkey or seafood. Peanuts are high, but I'm not for peanuts because the allergenicity of those. But almonds are good. Almonds are also high in salicylates. They can help with the headache. They're natural pain relieving nuts. Avocados, bananas, and also pumpkin seeds, yogurt, cheese, and there's other foods.
Good
So
stuff. Yeah, that's
yummy.
great.
Mhm.
Well, lots of ways to increase our energy. I know what it feels like that midday to grab a cup of coffee, but I'm going to try to do a couple of other things, spearmint, all those things first, and do a little bit more research.
The B vitamins, a good B complex is important, because if your B vitamins are deficient due to a methylation SNP, which half the population has, then your homocysteine will rise. I don't know if my husband's homocysteine was crazy high. It was like 24 for a long time.
I'm looking at my labs right now since I have them in front of me. My homocysteine super high. That's
What
not
is
good.
it? Yeah.
Well, do I want to say? I don't know if this is super high. It's 17.7. Does that mean something to you? Because it doesn't to me.
That is high. I wouldn't say it's super high, but it's high and you need to address it. And what that says to me is, do you have a methylation SNP? Do you have that problem? Did you do the 23andMe
I
genetic?
have done 23andMe, and it's interesting you say that. I think a lot of people don't know what that means. You say methylation SNP. And what I've heard in the past and what I know from my 23andMe is that MTHFR gene. If you've ever heard of it, look it up if you haven't. And I believe I do have that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. And if you have a SNP, it's just a personality. It's like a speed bump in the genetic code.
Hmm.
And again, almost half of the population has this. I have it too. And there's a couple of variants like C677T and A1298.
It amazes me you remember all these numbers.
But basically, that pathway, it amazes me too. But the pathway converts folate that we get in our diet into something more biologically active, which is usable by the cells. And so a SNP in that genetic code blocks that. And when you don't have enough of this biologically active folate, then what happens is you have a higher risk for all kinds of things, because your cleanup crew isn't working that well.
Hmm.
And one of the other problems with the methylation issue is that the homocysteine will rise. So when you see a person with high homocysteine, you almost expect that they have a subsequent issue either in their genetic code or in their diet, where they're not getting enough B12 or folate. And so those are two supplements that are often used to help people with high homocysteine. Another one would be riboflavin 5-phosphate, which is the biologically active form of riboflavin, sometimes even niacin. The B vitamins, basically the B vitamins, which are very high in leafy greens, and B12 is high in animal proteins.
So knowing that I have that gene, being aware of that means now I know B vitamins are very, I mean, they're important for everyone, but harder for me because
Yeah,
I have that gene. So
yeah,
doing a 23andMe or some of those tests and knowing, yep, I've got that gene means that maybe that's why my energy is low, that I can
yeah,
take some more B vitamins. I mean, there's so much we
yeah,
can learn from understanding our genetic makeup and then our individual issues. I mean,
yeah,
I feel so empowered by that because I think it's not really that I have something wrong with me. It's just something that I can do to take a
yeah,
supplement and be aware of it, take control
yeah.
of my own health.
Yeah, we have like thousands, tens of thousands of genetic in the DNA strand. We have tens of thousands of variants and SNPs and things like the code is very makes us all individual. I have a SNP in my TCN transcobalamin, so I have a hard time absorbing it from my diet and then utilizing it. So I have to take B12 every day. And on that note, people will go rush right out and buy B12, and I want them to be careful because if it doesn't have the word methyl in front of it, it's of no value to you,
Mm,
in my estimate. There are forms of B12 out there that start with other prefixes like cyanocobalamin. It's okay. It's not methyl, so it's not going to work as well. What you're looking for is the word methyl. So, as it pertains to folic acid, I wouldn't take that. That's a synthetic, it's almost like a drug, although it's a vitamin. It's not methylfolate, which is natural. And so that's why I made a dietary supplement called Mito B Complex, which has the methylated forms of B, because that's the way your body uses them and recognizes them.
and that's something that we can get from you on your website.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of my best sellers because it works. It provides people with a full range of the B vitamins. They're all methylated and biologically active. When you go out and buy just a B complex from the pharmacy, you're getting inactive forms of B. And then your body has to have all the right nutrients and the right levels of hormones to
Mm,
convert them to the methylated form. Good luck with that.
yeah,
That's why the
it's
joke is
already overwhelming. Yeah,
totally. The old idiom, making expensive urine that's what they're referring to. But when you give your body the body ready forms of nutrients, you can help tamp down the inflammatory cytokines like homocysteine, which I don't mean to scare you or anyone listening, but that's a risk factor for heart attack. That needs
yeah.
to come down. And you can't bring it down with a drug. You can only bring it down with natural B vitamins, whether supplemented or eating a green leafy diet.
No, I don't like it that mine is high right now, and I'm going to do something about it. Thanks for helping us understand this. I know it was a lot of numbers and a lot of big words for people who might be listening. So if you're on a walk or you're in the car and you didn't get a chance to write some of these things down, we'll be sure and put them in the show notes so that people can go back. And I know your products, I believe in them. You're amazing. I've known you for so long, Suzy, and I believe in whatever it is that you have created. So I'll be sure and put a link in the show notes to where people can get a hold of those if they're interested in that as well.
Thank you, Natalie. It was great to be with you and to talk about energy. It's such a timely topic, and you're a great host.
Thanks so much. I'll talk to you again soon.